One thing that's always been interesting to me, Jeffrey, is you're out here on the West Coast, and people do look to you for your various calls and views. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you kind of sift through the noise? How do you get your information? What do you look at?
I look at news wires more than anything else, and I try very hard to pay no attention to what other people think. Um, Sometimes people do things, they say like, name somebody that you admire or something, and I always think about it, and one person I really admire is someone that most people don't know the person's name. His name is Donald Judd. And Donald Judd was one of the great, you call him a sculptor if you want to, of the 20th century. He broke rules and made people angry because he actually didn't make the sculptures himself. He designed them and then sent them off to machine shops. And this was back in the 60s when he started. And that was considered to be, that can't be art because it doesn't have the artist's hand in it. But Donald Judd was an art critic in New York City, and then he tried his hand at painting, and he was, as an art critic, was very involved with the art scene, which was very vibrant in the late 50s and early 60s. New York was the artistic capital of the world, having moved it from Paris. And Donald Judd became very involved as a critic, and then a painter, and then he decided that being in the New York art scene was detrimental to his own artistic vision because he was too influenced by Willem de Kooning and Andy Warhol and Eva Hesse and all these other luminaries of the time, and that it made him distracted, that other people's ideas were confusing him and taking his vision of his own art and making it more diluted. So he did something very radical. He got up, and thanks to the generosity of the Dia Foundation, who bought an old Korean army base that he had served at in Marfa, Texas, which is the definition of the middle of nowhere, he set up his art studio there in the old barracks and the old artillery sheds. And he wanted to get away from all of the noise. And by far his best work is in Marfa, Texas. It's the greatest art installation I've ever seen. It's hard to get to. It's like 300 miles away from any commercial airport, so you have to fly in either and drive, or you've got flying out to the jet strip there. And that really spoke a lot to me, because I realized that doing things like, there's some events that I get invited to all the time, like groupthink events. They call them like Titans dinners and stuff like this, and all these hot shots are there, all these names of people that we all know in this business. And they'll all be there, and you can sit there and you will share ideas. And I did a couple of those years ago, and I would sit there, and here's Mr. Great, number one, and he's massively bullish on Apple. And then they turn to Mr. Great number two, and he's massively bearish on Apple. And both of their arguments sound really good to me.
Right.
So I'm sort of like, I don't know what I think now about Apple. I mean, I might have walked in the room thinking something positive or negative, but now I'm just confused. And so I think what's important is to look at the news flow and watch for those times when the news doesn't change, but the interpretation does. Or the news does change and the interpretation doesn't. Those are moments where there's this gap of opportunity. And I think my primary skill has always been living in that gap in a way that's quicker, maybe just because the way I operate, I don't know, than other people. And so that's the real key, is to look for harbingers and instances of the cusp of change. When you actually get a moment, you can act on it. I mean, strange things happen. I remember when Ben Bernanke, when things were looking pretty grim back there in 2011 or so, he said, we're going to keep short-term interest rates at zero for at least 3 years. He pre-announced 3 years of zero interest rates. And shockingly, many instruments in the bond market that were sure to profit tremendously from zero interest rates for 3 more years, they didn't go up in price for like half a day. And I bought them all. And I was like, why aren't people buying these? I don't know, but they should be like 20 points higher. And they were 20 points higher about 2 weeks later, but they were actually there to be had because people want to see the idea that they have get ratified or corroborated by a crawler on some financial program. And they, oh, I see, now it's safe to do this because everybody else saying that this is the conclusion you're supposed to draw. but by then it's priced in. So the opportunities, by the time it's safe and you have a confirmation that your idea might be broadly embraced, by then it's too late. So that's really the key. Also, just trying to find relationships. I have a whole team that what we do is we just look for correlations that might be common sense, but then you verify them. Some things that just correlate well. Like for example, things like the Fed's underlying inflation gauge, which doesn't get nearly enough attention. It correlates incredibly well to CPI, core CPI, on about an 18-month lead basis. It's got about an 80% correlation. Nobody knows about this. Well, we do. Unfortunately, I speak to people like you and I give my ideas away, but it's okay because relationships don't hold up forever. The world changes, the variables change, the coefficients change that drive things. And so it's really important that you sort of just stay on top of it. That's why I do what I do. I mean, I could have retired a long time ago. I find it very interesting as a way of processing human behavior, society, and just understanding what makes the world go around.
Well, I want to follow up on a couple things here. You mentioned that your team here, and I've met a few folks from DoubleLine in the past couple of years. How do you think about talent? What do you look for when you're hiring someone?
I generally like to hire people who either I know or who know nothing. I don't like bringing in people from other firms who have like 8 years experience because they've learned some other way. And it does, not that the other way is wrong, but it's not the way we do things. And it's not that we do everything perfectly, there's only our way. But I like people who are right out of school because that way they don't have to be untrained from what they thought they learned somewhere else. And then I like people that I know the way they think. So we like people that are very analytic. We like people who are believe in shared success. I tell people when they start working here, at many firms, you succeed by killing the person next to you. If you even go in that direction, you're gone. I want people to want the person next to them to do well, because the person next to you doing well means the firm does well. And so we have a shared success philosophy, and it kind of comes from the top because I never yell at anybody. My philosophy is everything that goes right, the team did it, and everything goes wrong, it's my fault. And I think that people appreciate that.